Hello, my name's Fran Stovold, and I'd like to welcome you to the Sporting Heritage Conference 2022. This year, we are running a series of conference webinars which will explore where the two spheres of heritage and sport intersect. In this session, we're going to look at how diversity is represented in sport and in turn in sporting heritage. And without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our chair for this session, Julia Lee. Julia, over to you.
Hello everyone and welcome to the session. I must say I'm really excited about this session and the two other presenters, Amazin and Matt, who really represent sort of the diversity of sport but also sport in heritage, which can bring so much to communities. I'm first going to tell those that don't know anything about me a little bit more about me, and then I'm going to ask Amazin and Matt to introduce themselves, and then we're going to have a bit of a discussion around diversity and see if things have really changed from where we started from to where we are. So without further ado, those that have never met me, my name's Julia Lee. My background's rugby league. I was one of the first women rugby league referees in the 1980s, 1990s, which makes me feel really old now. I refereed men's professional rugby league, was the first one to do that in the UK and also Australia. I was also the director of development of the Rugby Football League for 20 years. So I've been heavily involved in the sport and had a journey through interesting times around diversity and inclusion within rugby league. So in the 1980s, 1990s, you know, women in rugby league was a non-entity really. There'd been women involved in clubs and in sport, and there'd been an attempt for women to play in the 1950s that was thwarted. But up until the 1985, there was no women's leagues that started playing, which sort of brings me into a project that I'm involved with, which I'm really excited, which is why I've titled myself Women in Rugby League. Because in 2017, I discovered where our archives, that's the Rugby League archives, are held at Huddersfield University, or the University of Huddersfield. All the Rugby League archives are held there, and there's a real documented about the 125 years history of rugby league. There was nothing whatsoever about women's rugby league or women's involvement in rugby league. All I had on that particular day was my little box of goodies that I went into in Heritage Key, and that was it on the history of the sport. So that's when I discovered that, you know, we really need to begin to change this. There is just no record of women's involvement, and there's been a really great piece of PhD research by Dr. Victoria Dawson, which sort of charts women from the early to the late 1800s right up to the 1950s. And 60s and 70s when their, you know, involvement in the sport. So I managed to secure a heritage lottery to begin to look at and collect and archive women's history from when the women started playing in the 1980s. But more relevant for this particular project was the Life with the Lionesses, which is the history of 1996 to 2003, when women toured Australia, New Zealand, and the first World Cup was actually held here in 2000 in the UK, which actually had been written out of history. There was no record of these women. These women, and also the men that coached and were involved within the squad, there was no record of them being involved in the sport. There was no record of them, what they did within the sport, or even that the games had actually been played. None of the women had received international honours. None of them had received caps or a heritage number. So it was about time to tell their story. So in the year of the Rugby League World Cup, that's this year, we have been celebrating the Life with the Lionesses. We've had an exhibition touring the women. We've had over 15 women do in the Women in Rugby League YouTube channel tell their stories of the history. Some of these women, interestingly, had never told their children that they played internationally. Some of them had just stored everything in a loft and forgot that they'd played internationally because nobody else recognised it. And I think a real historic moment was because in 1996 they toured Australia. And in 1996, they came back with the Ashes, which is actually the last British team to ever come back with the Ashes, beating the Australians. And nothing was written about it in history. And they actually were asked when they came back, interestingly, which I could go on for hours about this, the only recognition they got was being invited to Wembley. They were all put in white tracksuits and were asked to be the pre-match entertainment, waving flags in these white tracksuits, despite them being full internationals. So this project has been really exciting. You can find out more information sort of about the life of the Lionesses, but one of the biggest outcomes that we've had from it is, and that's why the importance of history and the diversity in history is so important, and actually collecting that history, because we've been collecting it all year. And the outcomes of the project is finally all those games are now recognised on the Rugby League Record Keepers database. They were never there. So they had all the records of the men's World Cups and the men's games internationally, but nothing about the women's. So we've been able to document that, challenging as it might was as well, because they don't normally have amateur teams on. But actually the women's league had played amateur, so we've added that. The other is that 73 women have now received their caps and their heritage numbers, and another 43 England women have received their caps and heritage number. And the final really big, final two really big things is, on the Rugby League World Cup, there was no recognition of the 2000 or the 2003 World Cup. Because of this project, the World Cup, the Rugby League World Cup, went back to be engraved to recognise the winners and the runners-up in 2000, which the first World Cup was here in the UK with New Zealand winners and the Great Britain team runners-up, and also the 2003 World Cup that happened in New Zealand has been documented. And I think the most exciting thing is, and I've been after this for 20 years, women were never allowed in the Hall of Fame. And when I say allowed, it was just one word that said they had to play professionally. Women were never allowed to play professionally or get paid for playing. So over this year, we've negotiated for the past six months for women now and wheelchair players to go into the Hall of Fame, which represents the best players in the country. So we now have Brenda Dobett, Lisa McIntosh, and Sally Milburn as the first three women in the actual Hall of Fame. So I just think the diversity of it all and this project and how it's brought to life the importance of history and the way that these women are now engaging with the sport, back engaging. I'm asking them, they're wanting to play again, they're wanting to coach, they're wanting to get involved in their local communities. It has really vitalized people who disengaged with the sport. So it's been a really, really exciting project. So as you can see, I'm really excited about my project, but I'm really, really also excited about our other two guests that are here on the panel, who have equally great projects that, great stories, but also great projects that they're running as part of sort of the diversity piece and inclusivity. And first of all, I'd like to invite Amazin just to tell us a little bit more about your story and what you've been doing.
Thank you. So wonderful to be part of my first Sporting Heritage conference. And I'm a recent ambassador to Sporting Heritage. I'm the first Asian and LGBTQ ambassador. So I look forward to so many projects and obviously in the next coming year of working with Sporting Heritage. Just a little bit about my background. I started sport when I was a child, so I have a lifelong background as a competitive athlete, Olympic coach, as well as a health and fitness writer. When I first stepped out into the field as an athlete, as a child, I was very aware that I was the only Asian kid in sports, and saw very quickly how sports saw my community and how sports saw Asian kids and Asian people in sports. I suffered a terrible amount of harassment and discrimination, being one of one in sports, and never hearing my story in sports, being an Asian athlete, but also from the LGBTQ community. I participated in many different sports, from tennis, netball, softball, athletics, but I always found team sports to be a very hostile environment because I never felt celebrated. I never felt included in sports. I was picked on by my other teammates and even my coaches. So I didn't feel like there was a support mechanism for me in sports, and nor did I ever see anyone that looked like me in sports, in the reflection of my teammates or in the coaches. I went into weight training, bodybuilding at a very young age. I started weight training at 6, and I started going to the gym 7 or 8. And I think for the first time I saw myself, bodybuilding just gave me a sense of confidence. It helped my self-worth. And it just was a sport that I loved. And I think because it was an individual sport as well, it made it much easier for me. I started competing competitively in my teenage years, and I love the competitive edge of bodybuilding. And I think I've always been very competitive in sports. You know, I never set out to be this sports advocate that I am today. It was really through my own journey as a child and as a teenager in sports, and never seeing myself in sports and seeing how I was seen by the sporting community, and not hearing about other Asian athletes in sports, and just kind of feeling like I was the only Asian person in sports, even though I knew I wasn't. But it's that feeling of solitude when you don't see the power of storytelling, of a story that's reflected back to you. I'm the only Asian LGBTQ athlete in the world to simultaneously hold multiple sports ambassador roles, one of them obviously being sporting heritage. All the work that I do today, you know, stems from my own childhood of not seeing myself and using the platform of sports to be able to champion equality, but also using it as such a powerful tool to share stories through sports. So I do a lot of high-level governmental engagement work. I speak to Fortune 500 companies and corporations and sports organizations of how we can champion equality through the lens of sports, if that's LGBTQ equality, if that's gender equality, but also making sure that we have diversity and inclusion in sports, and that everyone is represented in sports, so we can change the future of sports. And so the next generation of youth don't feel like how I felt when I was in sports as a kid.
Thank you, Amazin. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are listening to this workshop and understand your feeling of isolation, and particularly in team sports, and particularly as a woman, and you know, a woman from a diverse background as well, which is really interesting. That I myself, as you were saying, I was thinking, yeah, do you know, it's really interesting. And there's recently been a play written by Sarah Jane Dickinson around a gay man and team sports, particularly rugby, and how he just didn't feel he could engage in those team sports because that banter and that inappropriate behaviour just didn't suit him. Yet he wanted to play sport, and he desperately wanted to play it. So thank you very much. As I say, I'm sure there's a lot of people that will really resonate with your story, and particularly around disability as well. You know, there's Sporting Heritage. You've run a really a project around people with disabilities and inclusion in sport, which has been fascinating as well. Thank you very much. So without further ado, Matt, I'd like to introduce Matt from Lea Rowing Club, and just tell us a bit more about what you're doing in sport and inclusion and representation. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. I come from the complete other spectrum, I think. So we've got two people here that have achieved some great things at the highest level in sport and are operating at that level. I'm on the flip side of that. I think I'm down right at the grassroots. So yeah, Lea Rowing Club, we're based Hackney, East London. We are a local volunteer-led community rowing club, community sports club, essentially. We were founded in 1980, but actually our roots are in rowing in Hackney that goes back, I think, almost 200 years. We are now one of the largest rowing clubs in Britain, actually, with about 500 members, aged all the way from 12 to nearly 100. We have people right up there who are still going out in boats, rowing right into old age. We're, I suppose, a little bit unique in the rowing world, in that I think if you're not in our sport, we're a small sport, most people aren't. You've probably heard of the boat race, maybe of Henley Regatta. You maybe have a particular view of what rowing is about and who does it. Our history is a little bit different, I guess, to the stereotype, in that we come from the working class people of East London. So until relatively recently, our stretch of canal was working canal. We have timber yards and all sorts up and down it. We still have big industrial cranes hanging over it. And most of the rowing that took place on the river was from small clubs made up of local working men and women. So we have a slightly different genesis, I guess, to some other rowing clubs, particularly in London. We try and do a bit of everything as well as we can. So we have some serious competitive ambitions. We have people over our 40-year history and even before that have represented Britain at the highest level. We are sending out about 150, 200 people to race every year. We qualify multiple crews for Henley Royal Regatta, which is the highest sort of level of club rowing in the UK every year, men and women. But we're also doing a lot of serious community stuff. Big junior section, we cater for about 150 local kids, including local schools, giving families support that need it, so on and so forth. We do a lot of recreational rowing for people that aren't really interested in going and trying to win at the highest level, but want to go out and enjoy the sport on their own terms. We have stable boats available to people that do that. They often go on tours, they row down the canal to the pub, so on and so forth. We do a lot of work with our local, we've got a local Haredi Jewish community. We do a lot of work with them. We have quite a thriving Jewish ladies group that actually had their first foray into racing last winter. We teach people to row every year. We do all sorts. I couldn't really name all of it. And to be honest with you, most of it isn't me. We are a big group of volunteers that make that happen. I'm just the one I'm the club captain. I'm the one that's been pushed into the limelight today. We always want to do more. And I think this is where our link to sporting heritage has sort of come about. Particularly a couple of years ago during lockdown, there were a lot of things going on, I think, on the national stage where people were reflecting on diversity, how we looked after different kinds of people in our communities. At that point, we recognised, I think, that our sport is not outwardly as diverse as it could be, and probably inwardly as well. And actually, despite everything I've said about us being a bit different and, you know, having a different genesis to most rowing clubs, that our club wasn't representative of our local community in all the ways it could be. Hackney is quite a diverse place. It's constantly changing. And we perhaps didn't represent that as well as we should have been. So we sort of set ourselves a mission to grow greater representation of our local communities, our local diverse communities in all senses of that word. We want people to be able to walk past our local club and think, I can belong here, I can be a rower. I might not look like those guys I've seen rowing for Oxford and Cambridge on the telly, but that doesn't mean that I can't do this sport. We've done a whole bunch of work there. We've done a whole bunch of going out to people, trying to get them into sport, and it's been quite successful. I won't go on to all the details here, but one of the things that came out of it was this idea of an exhibition of who rowers are. So we put together a photographic exhibition called I Am a Rower. We've got photos of 9 members of our club. One of them's me. God knows why they picked me. But from all different walks of life, all kinds of ages, backgrounds, and all genuine members of our club who are coming down week in, week out to row on whatever terms they want to row on. And the idea is that we show that rowers come in all shapes, sizes, ages, genders, ethnicities, sexualities, goals, backgrounds and hopefully allow other people to see themselves as potential rowers in waiting. We had some fantastic support from Sporting Heritage in making that happen, and actually we've had a lot of interest in it within the club. People have realised, well, we've got a whole set of stories, heritage stories that we haven't captured. So a lot of what you're saying, Julia, about history that is almost being erased, we've realised we have a lot of that even at the grassroots level. For example, one of our senior coaches was in the first GB women's squad to go to an Olympics. We have very little written down about what happened there. Jill will tell you stories all day about it, but we need to record that kind of thing. And we started to realize that having these conversations is very important for us, for our history, but also in showing the rest of the world that sports can be and is for anyone. So our whole thing is, you can run a performance sport program while promoting diversity, inclusion, community, and actually that's what you should be doing, and we're quite proud of that, and hopefully that's why we've been invited here today.
Absolutely, and it's just phenomenal the work that you're doing. I know I've been really impressed this last year. Actually, I was lucky enough to go along to the Commonwealth Games, and I felt there was a real inclusive nature as you sort of walked around Birmingham, and you felt part of it, and that you saw representation. Well, I did personally of yourself, but also other groups that were there, and they were celebrating sort of the history. The Rugby League World Cup itself as well, for the first time ever, has had the women, the wheelchair, and the men's on the same platform. In fact, the finals this weekend, which I'm really excited around, are celebrating all those, as well as learning disabilities. I think they've got a lot to do still around ethnicity, but that's a challenge for the sport that it needs to take on. But I just think the fact that there's some grassroots and you can see yourself participating just makes such a difference within sport. So thank you, both of you. I think you've absolutely fascinating stories of where you've come from, and actually the work that you're doing to promote and to inspire others to be involved in sport, whether it be team sport or individual sports, which I think is really important. And also breaking down that isolation and unwelcomeness of sport, which can so often be there. How do you think the representation of sport is today, and has it really changed over the last 10 years? Amazin, what do you think? You're on mute.
I just had to bring my dog.
Perfect. Welcome, darling.
So wanted to... Look, when I look at the Commonwealth Games and the Olympics that we have just had, and thinking of, we had nearly 400 athletes at the Olympics, and I think only 7 were Asian. We've come further when I can think of, our number 1 British tennis player champion, Emma Ranicki, is, part Chinese. And when I think that one of the Olympics, the youngest Olympian was Sky Brown, who is part Japanese. We've never had that kind of high level representation before, but we still have such a long way to go when we're still sending hundreds of athletes to, all these major sports events, and we still don't have the representation that I see. And then when, and it's not just at the athletic level, it's also at the coach level as well, and the grassroots level of representation and inclusion and diversity, because I still struggle to see myself in sports.
Yeah, and I fully understand that, and I think one of my frustrations is that it's taken so long. So we've been talking about it for as long as I've been in rugby league, which is probably 40 years, and we're only beginning to see that inclusion. I look specifically from the women's sport perspective, but it's very white women, isn't it? And we're still not representative. And it's taken a long time to, as you say, capture on and be fully inclusive, where people see themselves at that high level of performance. What do you think from a grassroots point of view, Matt?
I would agree. I think the thing that I have noticed is that in the last few years, for whatever reason, people have, and perhaps this is because I'm in a club where this is happening, but people have stopped saying, oh, we ought to do better at this, and started saying, no, we are going to do better at this, and we're going to try things and make it happen. I've noticed a recognition, at least in our sport, that increasing inclusion and diversity is the future. Even talking cynically, I think people have realized that's where the money and the funding is. And, you know, if that's what it takes to change things, fine from my point of view, as long as it's positive change. And that might be the tipping point, I think. And I hope, really, because it's 2022, as you say, we've been talking about these things as long as I've been alive, and well before that. We should have made a lot of these changes years ago. Let's just do it, I think, is our point of view anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's around that positive action, isn't it? And really committing to it, and not, in rugby league, we've talked about it for so long, but actually played at it and not fully engaged with the local communities where rugby league is now. As you say, from a Hackney point of view, you know, your community is diverse and it's forever changing. So how do you engage? And rowing, as you say, is seen as an elite, Oxford v Cambridge. So it's how you break those barriers down. Have you looked at what sort of initiatives have you done to be able to begin to look at that and break those stereotypes and barriers down?
I mean, to be honest with you, people say, well, how do you do this? What are the challenges? And it's not really that difficult. You just got to start, you know. And we went and spoke to people. We went and put the message out. Look, we want everyone in our community to come and give this a go. There are opportunities. We made taster sessions available, and we set dates and put things in the diary and got adverts out there. But that was really just so that if anyone asked, we could shoehorn them straight into it, and they had no excuse. That's the easy bit. I think people find it very hard to go and have that initial conversation. They don't feel confident to do it. They feel awkward. Perhaps they don't engage with the kind of communities that we're trying to attract very often, and they don't know how they should be. But really, what we found is that the people within those communities fundamentally are the same. They're people that have likes and interests like anyone else. There's always people that want to try sport out, and if you go asking, you will find people that are ready to fill the spots. The only challenge we've had is our sport is quite, I was going to say, high maintenance. We have a kayak club just down the river from us, and kayaking is one of those sports you can go and jump in a kayak and paddle around and have great fun without anyone really telling you what to do, apart from you ought to wear a life jacket. Rowing, you sit and you face in the opposite direction to the way the boat's moving. The boat's quite fragile and hard to maneuver. It's quite technically challenging, and the level of supervision required is quite high for quite a long time to keep it safe. So we haven't been able to get as many people through the doors and through the sort of pathway, if you like, as we would have liked, because of constraints on the number of volunteers we have. But that's a good problem to have, to be honest.
It is. Amazin, what from your point of view are the challenges to engage with a diverse audience?
You know, it takes consistent effort, because we have been talking about this since the cows have gone home. And, you know, we look out into British sports and think, why hasn't it changed? With, you know, it is in 2022, it should be so much more diverse than what we see right now. And I always start with, look at who your friendship circle is, because a lot of times we may not just have those connections. And as Matt says, it's true, it's taking that first step, going into communities that we don't know anything about. But, you know, all these communities are welcoming. And if you're not from that community, it's about finding that community leader. Because yes, there are challenges, particularly when it comes to ethnic minority groups, because of the cultural challenges. You know, some of these groups, then you may not find anyone that speaks English, or the kids may speak English, but you have to ask the parents or the grandparents, and so there could be a language barrier there. I think one of the biggest barriers that I see across the board is funding, because many grassroots organizations or clubs, maybe a volunteer run, or just lack the funding capacity to be able to do this consistent outreach, because it does take effort over a longer period of time to engage these different groups and doing different things that may engage the groups. And then you may find down the track that you have to maybe hire someone from that community or find a volunteer as well, because your organization or club also needs to start looking diverse as well. So there are these smaller barriers, and then obviously the bigger funding barrier.
Absolutely, and it's really interesting around the LGBTQ community, and rugby league from a women's perspective has always had a high representation of LGBTQ, but it's been really interesting moving into trans and beginning to, because if we look at that next generation of young people coming through, they're beginning to know who they are and what they want, and understand who they are, whereas my generation coming through, it was taboo, you didn't talk about it, you begin to move on. How do we really engage with this generation of young people who I am in awe of, because they're wanting to be themselves and have their own identity, and really get them involved in sport? Amazin, what do you think?
There are now, when I think of the LGBTQ community, there are so many LGBTQ sporting groups, and I think that's a fantastic way to engage the younger community in groups where they feel comfortable. But it's also making sure that you also have representation. And I think we're not trying to invent the wheel. There are sports organizations and clubs who have been successful at that, and it's about connecting everyone, because you may be at a club that's just on this journey to engage an ethnic minority group or an LGBTQ youth group, but there may be a club in the next city or the next town that has already been doing this. So it's finding a way that clubs and sports organizations can connect to be able to learn best practices, or even just to be able to gain some support.
Thank you. Yeah, Matt, have you begun to look at the younger generation and meet their aspirations? Because as I say, they're particularly in London, it's fascinating. I do work in London and the North, and the London or the southern young people seem to be wanting to kick doors down a lot faster than where we are in the North. What's your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I mean, we're really lucky that the children we have coming through the club, often by really bunch of coaches that I was going to say this, that are really into the fact that young people want to express themselves, and often are trying to figure themselves out along the way during their time with us as rowers. And I think they recognise that, yes, we're a rowing club and we're about putting people out in boats and hopefully winning some races. But as much as that, we're a community and a place where people can come and express themselves and be themselves and all of that kind of thing. And a lot of it's trial and error, and it's talking to people and saying, what do you want? How's it going? How do you feel? One of the things we have found is that we can do more to talk outwardly about these things, and we should be doing more, challenging ourselves to do that more often. We have historically, actually, at least over the last 15, 20 years, had quite a big LGBT, I'm going to say, contingent within the, but it's always been, I was going to say, behind closed doors. It's been something that there are gay people in the club. We had, apparently in the 90s, we had a very big lesbian night that was run out of our club bar for some years. Lots of these things going on, but we haven't necessarily celebrated that or sort of waved the flag as much as we could and perhaps should have done. And so that's the kind of thing we're starting to do now. Someone said to me the other day, everyone should feel okay to boast a little bit from time to time. And I sort of, what do you mean? We shouldn't be boasting about it. We're not doing perfectly. We should be improving. But they're saying, yes, but you are having some successes as well. And you shouldn't be afraid to talk about that, because that helps people feel more comfortable to say, well, yeah, you are doing well, but I think we can do even better. So that's what we're trying to do. But I know we don't get it perfectly right all of the time, and we're constantly on a journey to figure that out.
But interestingly, I think for people to come into a safe environment where they can be who they are is just phenomenal. You know, and interesting that back to that history thing of your 1990s, and you know, the fact that you have a rich history of LGBTQ, you know, within the club is absolutely fascinating.
I don't know if that story about the night in the bar is entirely accurate, but that's what I'm always told.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be great to find out the stories and things that actually happened around
and get it written down? Yeah,
and you know, I think with oral history anyway, it's what people say, it's truth to them, it's their story, and it's their history. So whatever it is, it's just really, you know, part and parcel of the history of the club, which would be fascinating to really begin to uncover. And it's really interesting, isn't it, about that representation. And how do you sort of work around sort of disability and inclusion in disability within the club, Matt?
So we don't have, I get an email, I think, once or twice a year saying, do you have a para rowing program or an adaptive rowing program? And I had to say, well, we don't strictly, actually. You know, there are grassroots clubs in the country that have a dedicated para rowing coach and a sort of dedicated squad and set up for that. We don't have that, and the reason for that is we historically haven't been set up for it. And what we found is that a lot of rowing clubs say, well, we don't have that, and therefore we can't have people with disabilities along at the club because we're just not set up to accommodate you. Why don't you go to that other club, the other side of London that we've heard of? Look, here's their email address. We have historically taken a different approach, that when people come along that have some form of disability, we have some people with brain injuries who have sort of unique needs and so on and so forth, that we will try and find a way to fit them in to our club that suits them. So we've got people with quite different needs that have quite unique arrangements within the club, some that join in with sort of, I'm going to say, mainstream rowing squads on their own terms, some people that work on a more one-to-one basis with some of our volunteers, and we've sort of muddled our way to finding ways to include people. And we often have conversations, should we formalize that a bit more? Should we put a wrap around it and say, look, we offer a para rowing program? And so far we've said no, because actually you can define something and it won't work for everyone. And it's much better to say, right, we've got someone here, how do we make reasonable adjustments to fit them somewhere in the club? That said, we'd love to do more there, and we're constantly after ideas and how we can do more.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's at that grassroots level, it's about inclusion and them feeling part of a community, whatever background people come from. I know rugby league perspective, we now have learning disability rugby, we have physical disability rugby, there is some LGBTQ rugby, not particularly in rugby league, it's more in men's rugby union, that's more inclusive. They're talking about trans because of the physical nature of the sport. Should things be, you know, more inclusive around trans athletes? So it's absolutely fascinating how it's beginning to grow. And then we have wheelchair rugby league, which has begun a storm in this Rugby League World Cup, where we've got more people watching it than ever before, which is not a para sport, but it's just come and join. And you can be part and parcel of that. So it's interesting how sports are diversifying. Amazin, have you noticed much change around sort of particularly around sort of disability and the history behind, and from your involvement in sport?
In terms of what increased awareness?
Yeah, increased awareness, but inclusivity really. And is there a change? Are you seeing a step change within disability and sport?
I do. I have, and I definitely have seen a change, and increased awareness around disability and people thinking. And I think it just comes under this whole umbrella as under diversity and inclusion, as we're thinking about making our teams and clubs and grassroots more diverse, just for everyone. So everyone, and I think society has changed. Everyone now knows, majority of people know someone from the LGBTQ plus community, or know someone who has some kind of disability or from a different background. But again, I think it could move faster, particularly, London is a very multicultural city. When you're thinking about, out of London, and the access that people with a disability may have to grassroots sports, or just sports in general, can become a little bit harder in terms of that access.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think again, we've all sort of said that frustration of the slowness of that change, and the fact that for as long as we can remember. And just when I was doing I was involved in the Sporting Heritage around uncovering the stories of disability, but also women in sport. And actually there was 100 years of history that nobody knew about, that people were involved in sport from a diverse, from disability and women in sport in this particular, that had not been told because it was hidden away. And what do you think we can do to sort of improve sort of sporting history collection around that sporting heritage, about how actually sport has had a whole history? What could we do about telling those stories more effectively, Matt?
That's a really good question, and it's something that we've been considering the last couple of weeks. I mean, we just took a step and said, look, here are 9 people, let's take photos of them and ask them to tell their rowing story and see where it goes. And that's been great. Off the back of it, people have been going, well, why didn't we include this person? Because they can tell you. I mentioned Parker, Jill Webb, when she was rowing internationally, she's got all of these stories. Why wasn't she included? Well, we had to pick 9 because that's how many people you have in a rowing 8. You have 8 rowers and a cox. That's why we did it. It was arbitrary. And then people go, oh, we could do that, and then maybe we could write a book and all this stuff. And what we've just found is taking a little step forwards. It's got people excited and coming up with lots of mini projects that they'll push, hopefully. But it is hard because I think people don't think, they think of us, people at the grassroots level think, we're part of a small, insignificant club on, we're not Manchester United. No one's going to buy a history book about how many times we've won the Champions League. We're just an insignificant little community club. What's the point? Let's come down every Saturday and do our thing and then go home again. And I think people have started to realize that doesn't have to be the case, and there's an appetite to read and consume these things, and that it's interesting. That said, any ideas on how clubs that haven't started on that journey yet could do, I think would go down really well.
Yeah, and if I had a penny or even a pound now in this economic climate, for everybody who tells me I haven't got a story, I'm insignificant, in the sporting world, I'd be a very rich woman, because there's so many people that say to me, well, what does somebody want to hear about my sporting journey or what I've done? And then when I hear it, I think, wow, that is just, wherever it's come from, whatever, everybody has something really fascinating to tell within the sporting world. And I think just that oral history is a really great starting point. I know, as I said at the beginning, some of the women hadn't even told their kids that they'd played internationally in this particular project I'm running. And it's like, wow. And they I didn't achieve anything. In fact, one of the women who's now in the Hall of Fame, the Rugby League Hall of Fame, didn't think she had a story to tell. And she'd got the fact that she was in the World 17 stuck in the loft, a medal. She'd not shown anybody it. So that's because we didn't put value behind what they'd done and how they'd done it. And Amazon, do you see this sort of from your perspective with sort of the diversity and particularly from your background, that they don't see because it's never championed what women and women from diverse backgrounds, and particularly ethnicity, it's not championed, and they don't see it, that they don't put a value to it. And how can we make that so that it changes that perspective? I
do. And, it also comes down to, who's your friendship circle and who do you hang around? Because we can look at, I remember looking at the British hockey team picture before they went and competed, and how everyone was, celebrating them. And I thought, but they're all white. I don't see myself, a Black or an Asian girl in the UK isn't going to see themselves. And sometimes I think on the grassroots level, as Matt says, we think, oh, but our club's so small, it's insignificant. We don't see, there are no Asian kids in the neighborhood or Black kids in the neighborhood. So why should we have a story that portrays, that community? But, there's going to be one child that you don't know about who sees themselves in that grassroots club and then thinks, wow, and then goes and asks their parents if they can join. It's so important, because I think back about what it would have meant for me if I just saw an image somewhere or some marketing material or some sports, story that had my own story in that. And I always go back to the simple analogy that when you're thinking about storytelling, when you're thinking about marketing material to market your club or your sports organization in your local area, look at it and say, is everyone in the picture? And if you think not, then show it to other people, and then think, who could we reach out to? And then whoever joins from different communities, ask them, are they willing to share their story, because you want to engage in that community? These things are just so simple. It's just taking that first step.
It actually, if I can interject, it comes back to what you were asking earlier about young people and bringing them on board, Julia. Heritage is a word that makes you think of old stuff and, crumbling buildings and all this kind of thing. But heritage isn't just about the past, as we all know, right? And actually, I think we've found that involving younger people in the discussion has been really helpful. So our photographic exhibition was people of all ages within the club, but also, when people are struggling to think, how do we go out and engage the people we want to do, and so on. As you said, kids are coming through with a lot more certainty about who they are and who they want to be, but they also bring great ideas about how you can come and bring other people along with them. So I think part of it is also about thinking about, I don't know how you phrase it, current heritage as much as the legacy stuff.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. I know part of this project, something that I wanted to make sure happened, was the past met the present. Yeah. And we had a great event where Warrington Council had a whole morning, a whole day celebrating Women's Rugby League. And on the stage talking about them was the 1989 tour, was the Lionesses from 1996 to 2003, was the present day players, but also the England players. And to me, that was a perfect storm of bringing heritage together and everyone celebrating. And I know after one of those events, the then captain at one of the clubs said, "Thank you. I just see images of these women and these role models that I didn't know about, and I can inspire to, and I'm so grateful for them doing what they've done in order for me to play." So it made them put more value on the sport, knowing what their journeys was in order to get them to achieve. And it's really fascinating how it's impacted on so many lives, for definite. Rugby league also, where we had the first Black captain in any team sport, and nobody knew about her. So it's about that role model out there, and now she's in the Hall of Fame as well, because she was such an instrumental player and an awesome player of her time. And I guess it's making sure that we value that, isn't it, and put it in the place where it wants to be, to inspire that next generation. And how can we really advocate this begin to change then? So we've got all this, we know that we're beginning to uncover and we need to uncover sort of more heritage, but how can we advocate heritage in order to make this change? What are your thoughts around that, Amazin?
That's such a great question. And I was just thinking about what Matt said in terms of, you know, how do we create this future of sports? Because heritage always can, obviously, you know, seems in the parts, and it's not usually a word that the youth would use. And I was thinking about, you know, what does our sporting future look like? And, you know, how we advocated is, you know, we have to go where people are going. And I think particularly, you know, youth, you know, they're not reading newspapers, they're not looking at magazines, they're on social media, they're making TikTok videos. You know, it's engaging them, making them part of this advocacy and this project, because it's their future in sports, and asking them, you know, to create little videos to advocate on behalf of being able to change the future of sports. But it's also going to the sporting funding bodies as well, that if we want to create a diverse and inclusive sports future, that, you know, we need the funding as well, because, you know, we can't consistently run on volunteer time, because there are costs involved in terms of reaching out to different communities, maybe hiring new staff, and looking at how we can shape the future of sports.
Thank you. What's your thoughts, Matt?
Agreed on that. And actually, on that last point, I think funding bodies are starting to shift their message and their priorities as well. There is money being made available to support these things. In fact, what we found in the rowing sphere is that the sort of higher level bodies are starting to look to the grassroots, because we are where it starts, if you see what I mean. If you want to increase diversity in rowing, you need to start with where the rowers learn and where they get into the funnel, I guess, that takes them up to the Olympics. And so they need to be supporting us. I think actually what we found is, as well, at the grassroots level, we've spent a lot of time trying to figure out what to do, but even at the sort of NGB level, they're trying to tackle the same challenges, and they're just as lost, to be frank, as everyone else. So we're all in it together, and that's fine, as long as we acknowledge that. We can all figure it out together, I think is sort of what we're starting to conclude.
And it's about that genuine pathway and inclusivity, isn't it? It's great if you start at grassroots, but then how do you continue? How does the continuum, so that they can reach, if they want to, that performance level, or people have the genuine opportunity to be able to achieve at the highest level in whatever sport they want to participate in?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very simple thing. As our head men's coach puts it, the more people I get through the door, the bigger the pool, the more likely I'm to find a Henley medalist. And it's the same at the Olympic level. The more people come in at the grassroots of different backgrounds, the more likely you are to find the one that will go and win a gold medal in, 15 years' time. It's a no-brainer when you look at it that way. And everyone is starting to realize that. Whereas I think until pretty recently, to be quite honest with you, at least in our sport, people saw inclusion going out at the grassroots and attracting a broader set of people as a distraction from their performance objectives. And that's not acceptable anymore. And it's also wrong. It's not a distraction. It will help improve results further down the line. So,
and have you seen that shift of attitude, Amazin, as well?
I have, but again, it's still quite slow. It's not fast enough, because we shouldn't be having this same conversation every single year and providing the same advice of how we make sports diverse and inclusive.
Yeah, and I admit I know the Women's Sport and Fitness Foundation. I remember every year, so 20 odd years ago, I used to go, and they used to be saying we need to up the marketing about women, we need to do A, B, C, and D. For 20 odd years, I remember sitting there going, I'm fed up. I'm fed up of this now. But from a women's perspective, in my sport, in rugby league, I've seen a step change this year where on the BBC there was women wheelchair and men represented, there was women presenters, not from a diverse background, I must say, from an ethnicity point of view, but there was a change of men and women gender, which I have never seen before in all levels represented, which was, and disabilities and abilities. So it's made me smile this last month and have hope that when there is resources put in, when people genuinely understand what inclusivity is, that's easy for everyone else to say, that it can happen and people understand that change. And I think from this conversation, and thank you so much, both of you, for your input and your honest evaluation of where things are at the moment, that we can see real change if there is that investment, and that genuine inclusivity is about the broader context of bringing it through at the bottom, increasing the amount of people involved in sport for us to then be able to come to where then the pathway is genuinely inclusive because everybody's come through the sport feeling part of it and parcel of it. I don't know if there's anything you two want to add before we sort of wrap up today.
I think my thing is sort of backing up your point. We've been talking about this for forever, it seems. Change is slow. It's got to be a little less talk and a little more walk, to use the cliche. We all know what needs to happen now. We need to stop being scared of it and just get on with it. And you don't have to go in with a big sort of blue ribbon project that's going to change the world overnight. Start small, do things, and you will see change. And we found that, early on in our I Belong work, when we were starting to try and attract people representative of our local diverse communities, we had a bunch of 4 local rowers who weren't white out in a boat, just being the basics, rowing along. And what they said to us afterwards is, did you notice the people on the bank? I said, well, what are you talking about? There were people on the bank that looked like us that walked past, and they all got their phones out and they all recorded it, because there were people like us out in a boat and they saw that people like us can do this sport. And we've ridden that sort of little wave of interest and success ever since, and it starts to snowball and it grows, and you will get there. So my thing is, stop worrying about it and just get on with it. Try something, see if it works. It really is not rocket science.
Okay, thank you. Anything to add, Amazin?
Don't think that you're trying to invent the wheel. Everyone had started in the same spots. And I think if you do feel overwhelmed and you think, I really just don't know where to start, ask questions. Go to other clubs in your local neighborhood, in your local city, because they may be a further step along from you and may have already engaged with the communities that you want to start engaging with. So, they might be able to make introductions or be able to provide best practices and tips of how they started. So, always ask questions. There are always other sports clubs and organizations near you, or even in the other city, that you can ask. Or even if you don't know where to start there, you could always ask a major national sports organization that could provide some introductions for you.
Thank you. Bram. Brown, you're on mute.
I think I'd know by now. Thank you, everybody, for your contributions. I think we covered a lot of ground there. And I think although it's interesting to see the change, there's obviously still a lot of work ahead of us, both within the sport and to see that reflected within sporting heritage collections, so that we can then be that repository for the legacy, both for those who are in the sport now, but also for those like the Lionesses and the rowers and the athletes of decades gone by. So this webinar is one of 4 that we're recording as part of this year's conference. All of them, if you would like to watch them, will be available on the Sporting Heritage website and on our YouTube channel. They will sit alongside our 2 keynote speakers, who are Karen Dobre from Lewes Football Club, which, if you're not aware of their work, they are the only club in the UK who split their budgets equally between men and women, and they're doing some fantastically inspiring work at this tiny club in Sussex. And also Debbie Cooper from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, who's going to talk about where sport fits in with those broader sort of funding landscape. Just remains for me to say thank you to Julia, to Matt and to Amazin for today's session, and we hope you've enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.